We will call the Special Assembly Joint Meeting with the Airport Board to order for March 6, 2024. Ms. Hale, would you do the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. We would like to acknowledge that the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunashish.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. And next we'll do a roll call for the members of the Airport Board. You just have to hit the little red button until it turns green, and then it's live mic. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Atkinson? Here. Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Wahogda?
Here.
Ms. Wall?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Hughes-Gandies?
Here.
Mr. Bryson?
Present.
Ms. Hale?
Here.
Mayor Weldon?
Here.
A quorum is present for the Assembly.
And
Airport
would you
Board.
please call the Airport Board, and Ms. Hughes-Gandies must be really important because she has two mics.
All right. Airport Board,
Thank
roll.
you.
Al Clow.
Yeah.
Oh. That's so nice.
We will start. Mr. Clow, I do not believe is in attendance. Acting Chair Spencer? Mr. Spencer?
Here?
Ms. Garza?
Present.
Mr. Peloso?
Here.
Ms. Soutier? Mr. Custer? And Mr. Bedford? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe you've got a quorum for 1, 2, 3, 4. No.
Okay, we are acknowledging that the Airport Board does not have a quorum, but I don't believe we have to take any votes tonight. So we will just go through our agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll start with the first item. First of all, I take it back. First of all, thank you to the Airport Board members here and to Ms. Watto for being here tonight. It's always a pleasure to see our boards. I know this has taken a while to schedule, so thanks for everybody for being flexible, and we appreciate your service on our boards. Now we'll move on to item 1. Ms. Kester.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I'm just going to briefly speak to the memo included in your packet on page 3, the Juneau Douglas North Crossing. I'm, of course, familiar with this project because it's the Assembly's #1 legislative priority, and we're working through a planning and environmental linkages study process right now. Actually, tomorrow, there will be a stakeholder meeting. There's 2 meetings, one at 1 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. And I know that the airport is included in these as a stakeholder. So the project team will be presenting on the different alternatives at that meeting. So I just want to put a plug in for those dates. But I'm very familiar with how important this project is to the Assembly because of the safety, the transportation efficiency, and the potential economic development and housing development. But I know that the airport has some concerns with how it might interfere with airport development, and that issue came up at a airport board meeting, and we had the opportunity to bring the Dow project team to the airport board meeting and meet with staff, and I really learned a lot from that meeting about the nature of those concerns. And I have in your packet here a couple of pages pulled from that presentation. Probably the most relevant is page 5, and where it shows kind of runway height and the approach issue. And the reason why I wanted to make sure that these joint bodies had an opportunity to talk about it is because I learned a lot at that meeting about the nature of the airport's concerns and how you were working through those. And I think that conversely, the airport board could learn from the Assembly about this priority. So it's really just to spur that conversation between the two bodies so that as we work together on this project, there's a solid understanding of both perspectives.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any questions or comments on this item? Ms. Garza?
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, fellow board members and Ms. Watto, but I think the language that came out of that meeting and that is now part of the packet addresses all the concerns that the airport had in terms of airport safety, runway safety, expansion projects, and so forth. So I think where we've landed at with the language that's in the project now is sufficient.
Anything else? Mr. Spencer?
And just on behalf of the board, I'd like the assembly to know, the board's not taking position on North Douglas crossings, except as it relates strictly to the airport, right? I mean, I think just about any reasonable person looking at it can understand having a huge amount of your population with one point of access, right? That's an issue. And so, our concerns have been entirely about the impact on the airport and the potential that may or may not exist for constraining development of the airport or constraining approaches that would cause us to have problems at the airport. So that's entirely our concern. We make anything other than that.
Thank you. Ms. Uscanias, did you have your hand up? And I'm assuming that someone will be at one of those meetings tomorrow from the airport or the airport board? Oh, Ms. Wall will be there from the assembly, but. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate this being added to the packet. I had heard from community members about concerns about approaches and things, but glad it was a letter or whatever comment was added to public comment, and then also I feel pretty good seeing the response back from Dowell and the project team. But thanks for flagging this for us because I know it was a concern by some. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay. Seeing nothing else, we will move on. And now I'm passing the chair on to Mr. Spencer because he's the co-chair, and we will let him run the rest of it until we get to item E.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the next item on the agenda is CIP current status and upcoming projects, and Ms. Garza, I believe, will help us out here.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. With the help of Patty, she's provided us some notes, and so again, I may refer to her for questions if there are any. For capital improvement projects for the airport, we have spent $230 million in FAA grants in the past 15 years, runway rehab, taxiway rehab, terminal reconstruction of the north terminal, terminal seating, snow equipment removal, sand chem building, fuel facility, runway safety area, passenger boarding bridges, aircraft parking apron, float pond work, outbound baggage conveyor system, parking lot rehab, ARF truck acquisition, and ARF stands for, is the firefighting, airport rescue firefighting. Reconstruction of ARF stations and bays, sustainability master plan, culvert road replacement, and cargo road rehab. I'd also just like to point out that in terms of airports, projects are a vital piece of airports. Projects are what keep airports going. That's why, SeaTac, most of the time when you go through there, there's always construction. So projects and FAA grants are very important to the airport. Upcoming projects, current capital projects, we have the main ramp rehab. That's a $17.7 million project. The Gate 5 passenger boarding bridge is in progress. That's a $2 million project. Parking lot has just been completed, and if you're a frequent traveler, you probably are very thankful to have a nice parking lot to work in. That's a $10.5 million project. A culvert replacement, which was something that was unexpected, was $700,000 project. And an outbound baggage conveyor is still in progress. That's a $1.6 million project. And we also had the last underground fuel tank removal on the airport property. That came in at $200,000, was just completed and is going through some remediation for the potential contaminated fuel there. On the airport CIP project list from 2024 to 2028, we've got a 2.7 million design runway safety area grade master plan update, acquiring an additional ARF truck, and acquiring wetland rescue vehicle. In 2025, we have a $4.2 million projects that include runway safety area construction, design with the FAA, runway 26 Mauser completion. I don't recall what Mauser stands for, but those are sort of, they're in use for the approaches and the lighting system there. And also in 2026, a $14 million construction runway for 26 Mauser and snow removal equipment acquisition, and also a land acquisition for the channel or coastal hangars. It's more commonly known as, but it's owned by the Lokins. That land is the last part of the land on airport property that's owned privately. So the FAA has approved a land acquisition grant for that. Those are the CIP projects. I guess the questions for me or Ms. Watto?
If I could, Madam Mayor, I guess I'm running it. So if I could, Jody.
Yes, you can.
Could I follow up on that? So the airport, once we start digging into the ground, once we start building something, it's an opportunity for changes because there's always something. We had the parking lot being rebuilt, we had concrete in, somebody says, hey, there's a drain under there and it's not draining, so we can either tear it up now while it only costs $100,000, or wait a couple of years till it costs $1 million. So we tear it up now. So there's a lot of change that goes through projects from start to finish. Sometimes they get smaller. Amazingly, that does happen every now and then. Bids come in less than expected. But what we're trying to do when we take on construction projects is we're trying to do something that improves the operations of the airport, that has some long-term value, and that takes care of a problem that already exists. And I think that I've been on the board now for 2.5 years. And by the way, if you don't like my presentation tonight, in a couple of months, you can do something about that. But you know, we really are trying to take this from the perspective that we are running an operation here. And you know, I think would all prefer to stay out of political sides of things, right? To the degree that there is political sides to things within the assembly, good on you. We would like to run the operations of the thing. We have still some projects out there that we have a project related to the flood, because we need to do a whole bunch of backfilling of riprap and everything because it moved banks on both sides of the river, including the airport side. So there's a bunch more money there. A couple of things that we've talked about recently, and that was, you know, when we're doing planning for budgeting, budget is a 4.5-letter word because there's all kinds of things going into it, and I've been on the board for 2.5 years. Mr. Peloso has been on the board for a little longer than that.
Over 5, I think.
Yeah. Ms. Garza, same thing. So I'm just finally starting to figure out what's going on, right? They give me a gavel, I can push the microphone button on and off, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. But if you want me to dig into some of the details about runway 3695 Northwest, no. But I'm a public member, right? And that was the first thing I said when I came on board was, I'm not an expert on airport operations. I know budgets, I know operations issues, I know facilities issues, but I'm representing the public. And so when we're talking about such things as the parking lot, well, I'm all over that, right? And if it comes down to technical questions, we've got a couple pilots, at least 3 pilots on the board, including the chair. So, you know, we have a mix of folks that you guys have appointed, and I think that actually works out pretty well. The other thing is, some of the things that we're doing here, well, we have all kinds of constraints. We have permitting constraints. Anytime we want to look at a piece of water, we have permitting constraints. If we want to clear brush back from the creek across the road, good luck with that. How long have we been working on that? For 15 years, and it has gone exactly nowhere. And that's back over now where the homeless encampments are, now that they've migrated out to the valley, essentially. And they're not encampments, but the issues that come along with folks in there. We had issues actually there with lighting at the parking lot before it was both when it was the old parking lot and now the newer parking lot. If you're out there now, you can see where you're going when you're in the parking lot, which is a plus. You also won't slip and fall on the ice if you're headed straight into the main doors of the terminal because it's heated. And then a couple of people asked me when we were doing that, why are you doing that? Well, long-term, it makes sense. One fall, and we could have paid for it just by putting in the heated sidewalk. So, another thing that comes up with budgeting, and I wanted to, I've got this nice fancy chart here. It's got, you know, I brought charts, so, you know, I'm talking the real business, right? So when we were talking, starting to get going on budget discussions here at our last board meeting, you're trying to project passenger traffic. This passenger traffic drives a lot of things. It drives what the FAA considers us to be as a small airport, a tiny airport, a non-hub. That makes a difference in what we can use money for or not use money for. So in 2019, we had about 460,000 passenger employments, departing passengers, if I remember correctly. And about 2/3 of that were large carriers being Alaska, Delta. So then the bottom dropped out of the world, right? We dropped from 460,000 to 164,000 in 1 year. So then it started coming back up. Well, when the manager and her staff are starting to put together what the budget forecast is going to look like next year, they're thinking, okay, well, we're rebounding, right? Airline passengers going back up and everything. Actually, 2023 came in slightly less than 2022. Who would have guessed, right? And we don't have the smaller air carriers information there. But, you know, we're just like anybody else. We can't plan with precision. But what we can do is take the funds that we have and apply them in a useful manner. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, frankly. I'm not an unbiased person here. And, you know, and every now and then we get a little sideways with each other, right? And with folks. And I have what I'd like to say to the assembly also is the chair and the vice chair don't necessarily run the show. We had an issue here several months ago where the security at airports is still transitioning, and some folks think that airports should contribute more to that. Airports, particularly small airports, think they shouldn't, that you're getting carried away. Much debate on the board. And then we took the vote, and the board motion to object to the extra spending. Passed. The two dissensions were the chair and the vice chair. So if you're thinking that you know we can drive the bus, no, we have to have everybody's hands on the wheel, right? Which makes things a little difficult sometimes. So with that, airport manager recruitment. So we are looking for.
Looking at item number 3.
Oh, did I skip item number 3? What a coincidence. The CARES grant funding update. Jody, did you want to tackle that? Jody is the chair. Oh, Mr. Pelosi.
Sure, you can take a look from there.
Yeah, there you go.
So one of the silver linings we had with the whole coronavirus thing is that it caused a big dent in the number of passengers that came through the airport, but it did free up a bunch of federal funds. So we've been trying to work on using up those federal funds so we don't lose them. And so it's given us an opportunity to to work on a bunch of projects that maybe would have been longer term projects or things that we wouldn't have gotten to right away, but let's get them done now. It was also helpful because since passenger traffic was down, it made it a little bit easier to build new things at the airport without disrupting passenger traffic as much. So the amount projected that we had under these CARE grants or CARE funding was $12.3 million. The actuals came out at 13.275. So at the end of the year, we were expecting to have about $321,000 of CARES grant money unspent. We've now got $299,000 of CARES grant money unspent. So that's pretty good. I believe that we're going to lose that at some point if we don't use it. So we have a few different things that we've got planned to make sure we use up every dollar that we can. So we're not expecting to have any unspent funds at the end of the year. So we've done pretty close to what we were expecting, and we'll take care of the rest to make sure it's all zeroed out at the end of the year.
Ms. Garza?
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, the 299,000 that is an estimate of what we'll have left of the CARES Act funding, that's not a final number. Some of the numbers that we have plugged into that equation are not complete yet. And as you know, as projects progress, there's always not always, but a lot of times there's a surprise at the end. And so it's either more money or less money. So that's an estimate of what we have at this point now. One of the ideas of using the CARES Act funds, if it comes down to the wire too, is using that for interest or debt payments. And I think that's a really elegant solution to use the funds. And it has been approved by the FAA that's okay to use it for that use. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that's the case. You know, these are capital projects. Capital projects tend to have long lead times, but we need to spend that money. And we're kind of at a point now where even if we put together a new capital project, we wouldn't be able to get it completed by the deadline. So Ms. Watto's done a little bit of research as to certain things that we could do pretty quickly, like retire debt. And so that's the sort of thing we can do at the last, within the last week of the time we have to do this. So we expect to use all the money.
All right. I think we've already touched on culverts, underground fuel tank, embankment repairs.
I'm interested in the RFR.
You are interested in the ARF truck, okay? So actually we need 3 ARF trucks. We have to have 2 operational, and if one goes down, we need a third one so that we still have something. Right now, we have 2 that are functional. We have a third that is coming down from Palmer on a ferry here shortly, hopefully. And then it will take a while to get it conditioned and ready to be appropriate. Then we are working on a procurement of a permanent third, and that's about, a year away, if I remember correctly, Patty? And it is, a year plus. And it is not cheap, but that is not surprising. So, but without having some redundancy, then if we can't just have one, right? We need to have at least 2 functional at any time. So we do need to have a third one for some redundancy. Go ahead, Ms. Garza.
If I could add on the ARF truck and the importance of why we need redundancy there, we have to, if you don't have enough ARF trucks available in a catastrophic sort of event, if the ARF trucks are not available and one is down, airlines cannot fly into Juneau. It downgrades the airport and we would not be able to have people flying. So that's the importance of having redundancy of the ARF trucks and in good condition.
Thank you.
And one thing I would add is that we actually did have sufficient ARF trucks, and usually you'd just be able to repair one, but because of one of them has become obsolete to the point where you can't get testing equipment for it, and so even though it actually runs, we can't technically use it because we can't get it approved because of this testing issue, and so that kind of put us in a bit of a bind. So we're working as quickly as we can to get something new on board that we can keep maintained.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Madam Mayor? Okay, great. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Those, is the purchase and then operation of those, can that use FAA funds, or does it, I mean, maybe that's a split question, like, anyway, it seems like it's required by the FAA, like, do they help pay for that?
I believe I can use FAA funds. The manager is sitting there and she's nodding vigorously. There we go. That's a yes, Mr. Smith.
I believe the issue is more trying to find one that's easily accessible and we can purchase in a reasonable time frame than the actual amount that it's going to cost.
Are we ready for deputy manager recruitment? So we have had 2 deputy managers in the last 2 years, I think. Longtime employee left, retired. We had another employee who had come up from Jackson Hole, Wyoming airport. And he was our operations, dealing with operations. He moved into the deputy manager spot, and then he suddenly left here several months ago. And they've been doing a recruitment that isn't working out, so now we've got a contractor trying to help us do the recruitment. The payback is that Mr. Adams, the deputy who left suddenly, went to Fairbanks, where it spent 40 below for a good part of the winter. So there is some justice in the world. And I will be back up there shortly, and I plan to see him and laugh. Not that I carry a grudge. So from my perspective, and I think probably from the rest of the assembly members' perspectives, we are not overstaffed in the manager's office, right? So when you have a deputy manager missing, then the manager gets to do a couple of things, right? And she's already got a full job. We would like her to stick around for a little while, as opposed to getting completely burned out. So hopefully we will get an deputy airport manager soon. Because even if they come in from existing staff, which doesn't seem likely to me at this point anyway, otherwise why would we have a recruiter? But there's still a learning curve, and if you're coming from somewhere else, there's a bigger learning curve. And so we're hopeful that we can get that going. But as anybody that's dealt with hiring in the last couple of years knows, now they're there, and now they might not, next week they might not be, right? I mean, it's a challenging thing for everyone in the country right now. So, Ms. Garza.
If I could just add to what Mr. Spencer said, this would be the 4th deputy airport manager since I've been on the airport board. And that is my opinion, we've not discussed this as a board, that this is near a crisis mode. I mean, Ms. Watto, the airport manager, is doing 3 jobs right now, and it's just not sustainable. And I don't necessarily have a fix to the issue, and this is something that, as Mr. Spencer said, is going on nationwide. But I do think we should have more of a conversation, intentional conversation about filling this position and looking at, I don't know if it's a wage, meeting wages, if we're lagging in that department, if it's benefits, if it's design of division of duties or something, but Ms. Watto's mentioned that she's near retirement a couple of times, and so that just, I feel a sort of a sense of heightened sort of crisis that we need to address, because as Mr. Spencer said in his opening remarks, getting used to or into a very complex airport is going to take some time for someone. And so we want, but also, and most importantly, is the sustainability of our airport manager, of her continuing to do the work of 3 people, of key positions, key management positions. it's a crisis. I would feel comfortable in putting that label on it.
Ms. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe a question for you and/or Ms. Garza. Do you have the ability to adjust the pay scale? Because, I think for those high-level positions, sometimes it really boils down to that. And a lot of cases lately, pay's really gone up.
Ms. Hale, I can tell you from my perspective, I have absolutely no idea. But it sounds like it would be heavenly if we did. But I would be surprised, having been around state government and municipal government. But I'll ask. It's a good question, Mr. Pelosi.
And I would say, this isn't like a job at McDonald's. It's a very weird niche specialty position. And so trying to find someone that's got experience at running an airport, there's not that many people out there. And as I'm sure all of us know, since we live in this community, this is not the most attractive community for all sorts of different jobs. It's hard to get lawyers, it's hard to get doctors, it's hard to get everything. So trying to fill a very niche position is I think even if we doubled the salary, we would still have issues finding candidates. So.
Next, general passenger traffic and operations summary. Patty, help me out here. Because I met with you. Pardon? Okay. Sorry, I'm just having an older guy moment. Madam Mayor, is there anything you wanted to ask, you or the members of the assembly wanted to ask us?
We'll open it up to the assembly. Is there any question that is burning in any assembly members about the airport?
Mr. Bryson doesn't have a question.
Ms. Hughes-Gandes has a question.
Madam Mayor, I don't, but I gave my fellow folks a second to ask a question, so I'll give them another second. Should have both of these on, but I don't want to do a feedback loop. Maybe they will think of one while I just share a comment. I just want to say from my perspective on the assembly, I have deep appreciation for all of our empowered boards who spend a lot of time, and it's a very specialized thing, and I totally understand after 2 years you start to feel like you're finally know what's going on. I very much appreciate the airport is one of our smoothest enterprises, that it's nice that I feel like I don't lose sleep at night wondering what's going on in the airport. So I would say keep up the good work, and we'll look into the staffing issue and things like that. It's just the more you can lob those at us with time and say this is something that's on the horizon. I know I appreciate that, because sometimes I don't know what I don't know about the airport. So when you identify something that you think is going to be a danger, the sooner we know about it, the better. And I would like Ms. Wad to, not anytime super soon, but I would like her to be able to retire and feel like we're leaving it in good hands.
As well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll echo Ms. Hughes-Gandy's comments. We're so lucky to have you all in this role. And it makes me think about, as we recruit, some of these empowered boards, there's always sometimes when we get lots of applicants and other times when we get less applicants. And I'm curious if the board has any thoughts on kind of how we should continue to make sure we have good folks such as yourself stepping up to play this role. Is there a way to improve the process so people want to serve, or places we should be looking when you at some point in the future?
Who wants to answer that from the board? How do we recruit new members? Mr. Spencer.
I don't know.
Okay, then we're done with you then, Ms. Garza.
I also echo Mr. Spencer's comments. I will say there is a good amount of interest on working for the board for the airport user group, but you're limited in how many user group members you can have on the board. And so I think awareness, if I, just to throw something out there, I think more awareness about the airport board couldn't hurt.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I shouldn't probably get into the tactics, but one idea might be a free airport parking pass. That's a big,
You actually have it.
it's a big deal.
Thank you for that, Mr. Smith. It might work. I just have one question that's not nearly as funny as Mr. Smith's. The Menhaw River embankment repairs, where does that money have to come from? The airport itself or, no FAA there? Bummer. Oh, I should say the airport manager is shaking her head that it has to come from the airport. Okay, anything further from the assembly or from the board to the assembly?
On behalf of the board, thank you for inviting us, because we're not bashful.
That's good.
We love to share.
And remind me what day that you guys meet, the day of the week?
The second Thursday of every month.
Okay, and you're gonna provide snacks next time, right? So we come?
If you tell us where you're coming, I will personally bring snacks.
Oh, that sounds
Tell me what
good.
you like.
All right, thank you, and we're still not quite done. Public participation on non-agenda items. Madam Clerk, do we have any Zoom members that signed up ahead of time? She's not in Zoom, though. Okay. How many do we have? Okay. Set my timer. I'm timing, so, since we only have 3, and, we'll go with 3 minutes if you need it. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, Ms. Craig.
Good evening. My name is Lori Craig, and I live at Auk Lake. I have 3 things I want to talk about tonight, given that our airport friends are here with us. First, I want to say what an excellent job the airport has done in clearing the snow. We have had 2 huge dumps in January of 30 inches, and they did a magnificent job of keeping our airport open. I wanted to be sure I said that to the board, and please pass that along to the employees that do such a great job. Once they finished the essential parts, they went to the part that I care about the most, which is the emergency vehicle access road. And there were hundreds of people that were able to be outdoors this winter because they plowed that emergency road, but it also serves as the airport dike trail. And I'm really, really pleased about that and want to give them lots of kudos. The third topic is something that I listened to on Monday night when people were testifying about the school board. And that word transparency seemed to come up a lot. And I think it's very important for the public to understand some of the issues that you discussed tonight. In the most recent information that came out from Dowell, there was no category for aviation safety. There was no discussion of the things that you all know about, but that I don't know about as a member of the public. This is a very public process. I've been involved with 4 EISs over the last 30 years. And public comment, comments from the experts, comments from the airport staff, that letter from December 14th, needs to be laid out so that people can understand what the problems were and then how you've resolved them, because it sounds like you have, but the public doesn't know this discussion. It's taken several months. They're really important, and they're public safety about how we run our airport, and whether we can land in those blizzards and complete fogs, where I've been out on the trail and I thought, there sounds an airplane. And we'd stand there with each other and say, oh, it's just going to overhead, isn't it? And it didn't. It landed because of the special procedures that allow our planes to land and get lower and lower and lower. And we need to be sure that nothing obstructs that. And it needs to be explained to the public why you all are satisfied now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Craig? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Ron Somerville. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Ron Somerville. I live in the Valley. I've lived in Juneau since 1979. I'm a lifelong Alaskan, and kind of some history of my involvement is in this written stuff. I knew I wouldn't have time in 2 minutes to cover that, but I did feel like the platform of which I'm testifying today needed to be included. Because of the crossing, I've been involved in every crossing issue.
Mr. Somerville, I'll have to look at my assembly members on this one. You're actually speaking to an agenda item. Do we want to waive the rules for him to speak on non-agenda item? Again, I'm getting a majority of yes, so go ahead.
Sorry about that. Anyway, we created a Mendenhall Wetland Study Group made up of 26 professionals or people that have been linked to the refuge. And they're mostly professional people. I served 24 years with Fish and Game. Matt Robus, Commissioner Frank Rue, people like that. It is a really legitimate group. And we've been involved with this process from the very beginning. The reason I'm testifying today, Madam Chair, is the fact that this process is not going well. And I know one of the things you're talking about is the relationship with the airport board, and we really appreciated being involved, at least being able to witness what happened in this last event. The issue of the airport safety, as Lori pointed out, has not been identified at all by Dow. I mean, I was there when they expressed their concern for the concern of the board, as well as their response to that, which I thought was very cogent and reasonable. But the point is, the public is totally out of the process. And when we started this whole process with Dow and the Pell process, it was supposed to include a substantial amount of information being available to the public. Transparency, I think most people in the political world call it. And it hasn't happened. And so I'm expressing to you some major concerns. And I realize Assembly's contracted for this. This will be available, the information from this whole process will be available sometime, making recommendations, and then go through a NEPA process. You don't want to jeopardize, though, the NEPA process, and I think that's exactly what's happening. And I expressed some of this in my notes here. So other than that, I do appreciate the Assembly giving us a chance to say something today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Somerville. And we have your letter. Ms. Wall, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Somerville, for being here. Can you talk to me a little bit about your concerns about compromising the EIS or what?
NEPA.
NEPA, what you think would result in?
Well, I've had some experience with NEPA, with Endangered Species Act and things like that when I worked for Fish and Game. And if you have a faulty, in other words, a poorly done preparation for the NEPA process, it can tunnel the whole process. I mean, it needs to be as open as possible, and I think anybody you talk to about will tell you that. There needs to be as much on the record as they can possibly get there. They may reject it. I mean, the people who make the decisions, but they got to tell you why. And if airport security is an issue, it needs to be addressed. I mean, that's all we're saying here. We hope the letter would have been at least made available to the public so they know the airport board expressed that. We're not experts in airport safety, I'll say that right off the bat, but we do feel strong about the transparency issue because our stuff is not being transparently presented either.
Take any further questions, Ms. Hale?
It's a question for Madam Manager. Madam Manager, I don't believe CBJ has contracted with Dow. I believe that's DOT. Is that correct? That's a DOT project, right?
Correct, Deputy Mayor. DOT holds the contract with Dell. We are just part of the project team as a stakeholder.
we are a stakeholder. So it's not our contract, it's actually DOT's, so we actually don't have control over it. So the comments might be better made to DOT, that's all I'm saying.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Believe me.
We're not done, Mr. Somerville. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. My question is for Madam Manager as well, so I'll hold it.
Mr. Smith, do you have a question for Mr. Somerville?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Somerville, I had attended, I believe in the stead of Ms. Wall or maybe Mr. Bryson, a meeting earlier. And I guess you mentioned the transparency piece. I'm just wondering if there has been a shift in the makeup of kind of the stakeholders group, or anyway, because at the time it seemed like, anyway, my sense at the beginning was there was good representation from people who had interest in the refuge and neighborhood groups and things. Has that shifted, or what do you feel maybe it's kind of led to a reduction in transparency?
Well, it's a complicated process, and I admit to that. It hasn't necessarily shifted as much as it's gone on way past what they projected would be the timeline for this whole process. And as a result, people, of course, got involved with the holidays. I mean, people couldn't attend a lot of the meetings for a variety of reasons. I won't go into that, but the stakeholder groups are still meeting. Everybody I see at the groups I attend show up, at least have somebody and their delegates present at the events. And we're going to be meeting again tomorrow to go over the latest release by Dow. And all I'm saying is we're extremely disappointed in it. I'll give you one example. If you can say crossing the refuge at Sunny Point has no impact on wildlife, fish or wild, but wildlife in particular, that's so phony I can't even believe it. I mean, our group are interested in that, but we've documented a lot of material to show where wildlife fisheries occur in the refuge and where they're needed to be protected, what areas are more important, hotspots they're called in some cases, but they've been ignored by Dow for some reason.
All right, thank you. And no further questions for Mr. Somerville? Thank you, Mr. Somerville. Ms. Hughes Candies, you had a question for the manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While everyone's still here, I just want to clarify, a letter was not sent to Dell and would not be part of the record, correct? The memo characterizes that a letter was drafted but not sent. Is that true?
Hughes Candies, you are correct. The letter was drafted and it was not included on the airport meeting agenda because per advisory board rules, all communication with elected officials needs to go through the assembly. We want to communicate with one voice. That being said, the concerns raised were worth addressing and having that conversation. So that's why Dell was brought in to present to the board, and it was a good opportunity to clear things up.
Great, thanks. Just want to highlight, we didn't bury a letter.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Okay, next we have, please have a non-agenda item, W. Carnes from North Douglas. All right, thank you, Mr. Carnes. And I don't see any other member of the public. So with that, how many minutes do you need between our meetings, Ms. Clerk, Madam Clerk, to?
Maybe you start at 6:30?
Okay, we'll do that. So we will start at the finance meeting at 6:30. And thank you again to the airport board and Ms. Watto for meeting with us tonight. We are adjourned.